Hi there. Welcome to a new episode of Mr. Drive Drives. I'm Joey, your host and narrator for today. Maybe you remember me from the last time. In any case, Mr. Drive asked me again to take care of the talking duties. Today's episode will show you some classic parts of the town of Vlietlanden with some real new twists along the line. Speaking about lines, today we drive line 67. This line is recently altered in a dramatic way. In its first incarnation, it was one of the shortest lines of the map. Since the alteration, it is one of the most extended lines of the region, although it's not the longest. Don't ask me which one is the longest of the 21 lines. I do not know the answer to that. So as already said, we drive line 67 today, which runs from Vogelpark in the northwest of Vlietlanden to Citaro, that is, as the name already tells us, on the south side of the city, the southeast side to be precise. It's one of those crosstown lines that Vlietlanden is famous for. The 67 has become a meandering line that passes through a lot of important city districts and has therefore acquired an important connecting function. It is along the route of this line where major rebuilding has taken place, but more of that later on. Let's first put some attention to the vehicle Mr. Drive is driving today. That vehicle is one of the newest additions to the OMSI fleet. It's released as part of the advent calendar of the OMSI web disc. It's an improved incarnation of the Mercedes-Benz MBO530 Citaro made by MX200. As you may or may not know, Mr. Drive doesn't have a real warm relationship with Mercedes buses, but this one he really likes to drive. For Vlietlanden city region, he uses the regional version of the C2. He even adapted the AI version of the bus so he can use it as AI traffic on the map. The repaint that is used is made by Jokervation and will be part of the Stadsregio Vlietlanden package. Why does Mr. Drive like this bus so much? Well, there are several reasons for that. At first, it looks good. Secondly, it feels like a real bus. And last but not least, it's rather easy to adjust this vehicle, so it's rather easy to let fit it in on Vlietlanden city region. Mr. Drive is still testing this bus to see if it will really do the difficult job to serve as AI traffic. Stadsregio Vlietlanden is a demanding map. Poly and script heavy buses don't fit in there easily. So it's an ongoing search to find the right AI bus. This C2 is a serious candidate. So in this video, you will see this bus acting as AI in the nice repaints made by Jokervation. As said, the AI version is further modded by Mr. Drive so it will fit in. Modding an AI bus means stripping the bus of all unnecessary textures, sounds, and scripts. So far so good. We are on our way to our destination. Have a good drive. I indicated earlier that we would drive through a number of classic areas of Vlietlanden. Well, you don't get more classic than this. The area around Vogelpark in Johan de Wittlaan has been part of the map since day one. It has been rebuilt a few times, so the starting point of the first days of Vlietlanden can no longer be found. That starting point was the route of line 24 from The Hague and the part of the route between the museum and the Red Cross Hospital. Near the place where we are now driving, there is even a bridge that was made on the basis of the Trust Bridge, a very famous place in The Hague. From the old history of Vlietlanden, we immediately drive into the present. The place where we are now driving has recently been added and brings us to another famous endpoint in the now long Vlietlanden saga. The next stop is Billitonplein. This was long an terminus on the map, but was eventually wiped off the map and resurrected from the ashes as a default stop. From there we enter the Indische Buurt. This district was only added to Vlietlanden later. I believe in version 4 or 5. So we are now on the edge of the Indische Buurt. I can imagine that you think, nice, but what is that? Such an Indian neighborhood? Because I still see that good old Manfred standing at the stop. The answer is simple. This neighborhood does not take its name from its inhabitants, nor was the name chosen based on the number of Indonesian restaurants. It is much simpler. All names are derived from islands in the archipelago. This neighborhood is therefore also called the Archipel neighborhood. Just like in The Hague, where Mr. Drive was born and lived, the Indische or Archipelbuurt is a semi-gentle neighborhood with artistic traits and a fairly mixed population, the majority of whom receive an above-average salary in their bank account. Since we all know that Manfred has a well-stocked wallet, we can be sure he fits in seamlessly. The buildings in this neighborhood vary quite a bit. There is new construction, there are ghastly office buildings, but also very old mansions dating back to the Golden Age. It has actually always been a prominent neighborhood where many traders and independent entrepreneurs do business, especially with countries across the border. That is different now. You don't come across self-employed people here too often. You are more likely to meet senior corporate executives or senior officials here, as well as descendants of the newly wealthy who mainly occupy the apartment market here. The Indian neighborhood has already seen many bus lines driving through the streets. Line 67 has recently been assigned as a connection to the rest of the city. With the new route, we could conclude that the district is now finally well connected to important places in the city. You can now travel to the Old Center, the Zeehelden neighborhood, the Burlage neighborhood, and via Vliettberg south to Zuiderwart without having to transfer. There is also a direct connection from the south side of the district to the Vliettberg NS station. The location of the district itself is also strategic. It is adjacent to the Europark Business Center, the Buitenwaard Industrial Area and the Hof van Eden Business Area. The Vogelpark district and the hospital located therein are also nearby. This neighborhood isn't that bad. You live here in a beautiful old neighborhood with an interesting history. There is enough creativity to keep the neighborhood livable. The chances of you living here next to a bunch of maladjusted idiots are negligible. That is different in a number of neighborhoods that we still have to pass. Which neighborhoods we pass more is of course the next question.
Hallo.
In making Vliettberg, Mr. Drive has not given much weight to naming neighborhoods, but a number have been unofficially named nonetheless. So we started in the Vogelpark district. I hope you didn't think that name refers to an actual park with birds. After the bird park, of course, comes the Indian neighborhood. From the Indiskepoort we graze a small piece of Europark and then drive into the Afrikouwalk. From there we continue via the Fruits and Nuts neighborhood to the Zeehelden quarter. To then drive past the center via an offshoot of the Old 2 district. We then cross the Spouw to arrive in the Berlagevaart, which takes us directly to the Reiters neighborhood. From there we drive into Damzicht and go via the Uethof, also a neighborhood, to east. Finally we go via Zuidberg to Zuiderwaard. That's all there is on this line.
Dag beste man.
Hey gozer!
Before going into further details about the city, let's talk a bit about building OMSI maps. Mr. Drive can still remember his first encounter with OMSI 1 at the time, very well. He saw it on YouTube. Google is your best friend, so the makers and publisher were also quickly found. Barely an hour after the discovery, he was already driving through the streets of Grundorf and not much later in Spandau. This to his great pleasure, but as it always goes with Mr. Drive, sooner or later the urge to manipulate will surface again. And this was no different. Mr. Drive has never been a forerunner, so he began his map building career by modifying Christian Schuyter's New Berlin map. Not much has been heard from Christian Schuyter, but Mr. Drive had found his shining path. Think big, thought Mr. Drive, and he decided to put a number of lines from Spandau in one card. This failed miserably. The old OMSI 1 could not process much more than about 350 tiles, and this first sample product already contained more than 500. Black buildings, transparent AI cars, and many stutters were the results. Completely failed, but a brand was born, and from that moment on Mr. Drive worked tirelessly on his Spandau Extremes. 4 parts would see the light of day. In these parts, an extension to Falkensee was built, in which the lines M37, 137 and 337 could be driven. The next version was line M32, complete with highway to Dalgodobritz. Then it was the turn of lines 130 and 131 to appear in OMSI form, and finally lines 136 and 236. In the meantime OMSI 2 had appeared on the market, and the Extremes could not be transferred to the successor of OMSI 1. This marked the end of the Spandau Extreme brand. Besides all the work on the Extremes, Mr. Drive was also working on a map that is situated on Dutch soil. This too was a sizable folder and consisted of 3 parts. It turned out to be possible to transfer these parts to OMSI 2 and put them together. We are now talking about 2014. This is actually the moment when Vliettberg was actually born and the foundation was laid for the map we all know so well now. So that's how it started, but why? Building an OMSI map is a time-consuming and sometimes frustrating activity. Many start but never finish, simply because there are just too many bears on the road. Within the OMSI world, repainting is the most common activity, followed by modding buses and building buses. Building maps is a neglected activity. OMSI has an SDK with a global guide on how to build a map. That will help you on your way, but you should find out most of it and certainly not be afraid of the trial and error method. You only learn by doing. Shortcuts do not exist.
Hi.
Building maps requires a combination of skills that not everyone has. You must first have a sense of proportion, clear thinking skills, logical reasoning, insight into traffic engineering, mathematical insight, technical insight, and it is useful if you can read the script. As an OMSI map builder, you combine the following tasks. 1. Traffic plan designer. 2. Urban planner. 3. Landscape architect. 4. Public transport expert. 5. Scheduler. 6. Functional manager. 7. Creative management. 8. Driver. 9. Software tester. If you are able to do all of this, then there is a possibility that you are a suitable candidate for making an OMSI map. But don't forget that you also have to be a good problem solver, be able to find creative solutions, and have a great ability to put things into perspective. Can you do all that? Then I advise you to start building an OMSI map right away. Because besides being frustrating, tiring, and time-consuming, it is also pure pleasure, especially when things go the way you plan them, and believe me, this becomes more and more common as you get more experience. Building a map is, therefore, no sinecure. Yet Mr. Drive has been doing this for more than a decade. Every time he wants to stop, but he always becomes fascinated by the impossibilities of OMSI. OMSI, because you can. OMSI, the eternal challenge. However, it will soon stop. Map making has reached its limits. There is not much new to discover. So what you see here are the latest activities of an experienced map maker who now doesn't know what else to add and improve. But before that time comes and Mr. Drive leaves the OMSI stage to great applause, there is first the completion of this project, Stadsregio Vlietlanden Xtreme. The largest freeware folder in the OMSI library. Given the size and high demands placed on this latest production, it will be some time before this latest version is published. This must be a masterpiece and not a rushed product. So far the OMSI life story of Mr. Drive, who has devoted more than 12 years of his life to OMSI. After this oral history we will soon concentrate on the route and on the merits of our driver. Because driving in OMSI is not always easy either. According to some professional drivers, driving in the real world is easier than driving OMSI.
Hallo.
Dag beste man.
Hallo.
We have now arrived in the Afrikouhoek. Not really a striking neighborhood. The people who live here work hard to afford their modest accommodation. The neighborhood has a mixed composition and mainly has residents in the lower middle class, starters, and young families. Today it is only bus 67 that crosses this district, although other lines do run along the periphery of this neighborhood. The neighborhood borders the Noden and Brutenbuurt where we will arrive shortly. The other side is bordered by the center, the 2 district, and Europark BC. This district was only put on the map in a later version of Vliettberg. Let's go back to map building and driving on Stadsregio Vlietlanden. Every now and then it bangs quite a bit, you notice that especially at zebra crossings and other road markings.
Hallo.
This is because it is not possible to disable the collision mesh for splines. That is not really possible because then you would fall through. But if you look at the pedestrian crossings, for example, to make them visible you have to place them at 0.07 centimeters, otherwise, they will disappear under the asphalt. Because they are that small distance above the asphalt, the collision mesh comes into full action and it looks like you're hitting a curb. So it's a diabolical choice. Or not visible or too palpable. In all the time I've been working with it, I've never found a good average. A good average is very important in all areas in OMSI. OMSI runs on an old engine, so it is quite difficult to get good performance. As a map builder, Mr. Drive always tries to find the balance between the desirable and the achievable. This means that there must be enough detail and variety in the map to keep it interesting, but at the same time, the memory must not become too full. So on a map of Mr. Drive you will miss details such as garbage cans at park benches, mailboxes in front of houses, and especially no details in places that are not visible. Furthermore, no rail traffic or air traffic and a balanced mix of two-wheelers. With regard to performance, the textures are mainly looked at. You can also do a lot there by using the right format. Preferably no JPGs, for example, because they still have to be unpacked before they can be made visible on an object. What is often overlooked, however, is the extent to which OMSI struggles with the production of sound. Too many sound and sound files that are too heavy lead to a significant decrease in performance. It is therefore important to take this into account when making construction decisions. For example, Mr. Drive always ensures that AI buses make little noise. Only that which can be heard from outside, and he refuses to use buses from Morphe and Alter, for example, because they are quite pimped, especially in terms of sound. Which is very unnecessary and very bad for the performance. It also seems attractive to fill your AI list with various buses and different repaints. However, it is not recommended to do that. It may look good, but if you are already thumping and bumping around the map, that fun is quickly forgotten. Stick to 2 or 3 different buses and ditto repaints. Afterward, you will reap the benefits of this. Some buses, especially Darius Bodes, have background noises from passengers. You really should get rid of it right away. It sounds downright shitty and it uses quite a few resources. You can easily remove them via the sound config file of the bus. Do not delete the sound file itself, because then you will get a constant error message that will further undermine your performance. So far about sound. Let's see where we are now at this very moment.
Hey, gozer!
I see where we are now.
Hallo.
We have arrived in the middle of the Noten and Brutenboerd. This is also one of those neighborhoods that have existed since the first day of Vlietlanden. At the time, this neighborhood was loosely based on a number of streets near where Mr. Drive has made his home. This has been modified several times over the years. The Nuts and Fruits neighborhood is a real middle-class neighborhood with many craftsmen and freelancers. Typically a neighborhood where the money is made. The very first line on Vlietlanden ran through this neighborhood and also past Vogelpark, the place from which we departed. From now on we will drive a part of the classic route that the very first bus lines on Vlietlanden also drove. Even the renovation here is partly that of the very first version. Feel the nostalgia during the ride through this piece of primeval Vlietlanden. Some adjustments have been made in the coming meters. stop
Hey,
names have been
gozer!
adjusted, the stops have been moved, and even more minor adjustments. So pay close attention. As mentioned, this is one of the oldest parts of the map. Buses already drove here in 2012. Recently, Mr. Drive decided not to run a bus on this stretch of road anymore. This is mainly because it is indeed still very old-fashioned here. The reversal of the route of line 67 made him reconsider this decision. This also has to do with other renovations along the route, but we will get to that. So this part is very old, and maybe, if there is still inspiration, this area will also be overhauled. The buildings listed here are from the default map. A bit boring perhaps, but they provide a nice balance to the more heavy scenery that comes from other payware add-ons. That's why Mr. Drive always puts some default stuff in his scenery. Just not to make it too heavy. As said
Hello.
before, balance is very important. Immediately on the right side of the road is a backdrop. This is because there is a hole in the OMSI world directly behind it. There has never been a tile there. Mr. Drive tries to avoid these types of constructions as much as possible, simply because it does not really give a realistic picture. Yet it is often unavoidable. It's a trade-off, many objects or one backdrop. There's that balance again. Anyway, anyone who says that this is not the most beautiful part of Vlietlanden is right. It's not and never has been. Sometimes things are the way they are. And, you never know, this may change. We will go on and make our way along the classic route. We drive past places that no longer exist, such as the 2 bus station. Are there any questions so far? Please put them in the comments below. In the first versions of the map, this area was the center of the city called the TU neighborhood. Together with the area around the old market, they both formed, separately, a historic center. Actually a bit like in Berlin, where there are several centers. This section where we now drive revolved around the Technical University and the bus station, which was located nearby and named after it. The bus station in particular had a turbulent history. As far as I can trace, this has been renovated about 5 times before eventually disappearing completely from the map. In this version, there is no TU bus station anymore, which has been replaced by the Lawrence Park. Also, the TU had to clear the field. As a result, the bus stop TU Place was renamed to Minerva-plein. So strictly speaking, Vlietlanden is not a university city anymore, and that's for the better. What to do with all those dull students? The name TU neighborhood has been honored and we will keep it in use. You're used to continuing from the former bus station to the Spuwaplatz terminus. At the time a terminus on the river Hetspau. The river is now no longer visible at any fields or roads there. That is why this square has been given a new name, Heemskerkplein, and with that it also connects seamlessly with the Zeeheldenbert. Although they are not along the route of line 67, more stop names have been renamed. The city park no longer exists, this has now become the Martin Tromplants ON. The Minerva-plein has already been mentioned, and the Villa Wellon stop on the routes from the Zeehelden Quartier is now called James Maxwellstraat. Bus stop Paleistuen and was changed to Munthof Oost but is now called New Ring.
Dag beste man.
While I'm
Hello.
talking, we're getting closer and closer to the place where the last major
Hey,
renovation took
gozer!
place. This too was an area created for the first version. After 12 years it really needed a renovation. The whole area we drive through before we get to the big renovation has also undergone quite a few changes over the years. The buildings have been extensively modified, as has the layout of the roads. Recently I came across an old video of version 5 of Vlietlanden on YouTube. In that version, German road structures and textures are still used. Later Mr. Drive started making his own roads, and in this version 90% of the roads are made or modified by Mr. Drive. You may sometimes come across a German piece of pavement, but that is actually a matter of having overlooked something. The intention is that all splines come from Mr. Drive's OMSI workshop, self-built or heavily modified to meet the needs of Stadsregio Vlietlanden Xtreme. That actually applies to the entire infrastructure.
Hey, gozer!
Goeiedag.
Hallo.
Hoi.
We are now driving on the new Range, a part of the route that Mr. Drive actually didn't want to use anymore. In the newer versions, the buses mainly go via Pascalweg and the Munthof Ooststop, thus avoiding this piece of no man's land. Because that's what it really is, no man's land. Not really a neighborhood, more like a transitional area. Anyway, it has been put back into use and now you pass here with the short peak hour service of Line 61 and Line 66 towards Vliettberg Station passes here. For example, the few residents here are not completely deprived of public transport. This part of Vliettberg is loosely based on the Carnegeplein in The Hague. In the Wallstad part of Stadsregio Vlietlanden Xtreme you can find a much better remake. Although without a Peace Palace, the road layout certainly comes close. We are now driving straight towards the Koning Willem-Alexander Park. By the way, that is quite unique that name appears on the map because Mr. Drive is a real Republican and does not like that crazy royal family.
Hallo.
But let's stay away from political discussions and focus on things to come. You may ask yourself, why is there a bus lane here? I owe you the answer. It probably has to do with the fact that a little Amsa map must have several bus lanes. Those expectations about what a map should have are certainly funny. You come across a lot of strange things. How about a village with 2 airports, 3 railway stations and 5 bus stations? They are served by 6 normal lines and 20 school buses. Realistic, I wouldn't dare to say that. One thing is certain. The youthful AMSI users know how to present their world in a concentrated form and where their priorities lie. Okay, we getting hotter now. When you look to the right you see the first signs of the major renovation. Here are other buildings and they are no longer hidden behind a row of trees. This is the interlude of what is to come. Now just wait until we get to the Uniscouweg stop. I think you already expected it. Here we go to the right, to that annoying bridge that could sometimes be left open for minutes. I have good news. The old drawbridge has been expertly demolished and the entire neighborhood has been transformed from a more rural to a truly urban environment. I'll keep my mouth shut for the next few minutes and you can discover for yourself what has become of this neighborhood. I can already tell you that the road network around the Louis Couperstraat has also been adjusted. No longer that backward long bend, but now more straightforward with a number of intersections. If desired, you can also drive along the Spouw. There is now a passable quay on both sides of the river. Please note, there are no official bus lines there. Enjoy, and I'll speak to you later. Well, that's quite an adjustment, isn't it? Quite an improvement if you ask me. Anyway, we are now on our way to the Gerard Rivecade and thus back in the old Vlitberg. This old must of course be put in quotes. This immediately gives me the opportunity to reminisce about the old times and the history of this map. With Gerard Rev as the first, we pass a list of famous Dutch writers. Because after Rev it is Harry Mulisch's turn. Mulisch considered himself the best Dutch writer, and of course, his most famous book, De Aanslag, is without a doubt a masterpiece. After Mulisch we get Jan Wolkers, a writer who likes to write a lot about dirty sex and difficult relationships. He liked to name the unnameable in his books. The next stop bears the name of Jan de Hartog. This writer is a favorite of our map builder and topical driver. De Hartog is best known for his novel Holland's Glory, an epic about the Dutch towage. We end this writer's tour with Tommy Wieringa, a newer but now established star in the firmament. This neighborhood is characterized by a lot of high-rise buildings, which means that there are homes in various sectors. Social housing, free market, and owner-occupied housing. This gives a diverse picture, and that is also reflected in the population of the district. Many starters and young families, but also many pensioners who once started here as a starter. The district used to be on the outer edge of Vlitberg, and there was actually only one route through the district. In the newer versions of Vlitberg, you can enter the neighborhood from 4 sides. Directly from the Zeehelden neighborhood via the Hermansbrug, line 63 serves there, via the Zeelandplein, with line 60, and then via the Tommy Wieringalaan and via the oldest access roads at Flevouweg and Gerard Rev. The route along Flevouweg was also in danger of falling out of use, but with the arrival of line 50, a bus is now running there again. By the way, other writers who have acquired a place here are the unsurpassed Renata Dorstijn and Hella Hassa. Let's elaborate a bit about the naming of the cities and villages. The place names on Stadsregio Vlietlanden Xtreme are basically made up by Mr. Drive. But yes, so much already exists in this world. For example, Vlitberg is also a company that advises on business design. Vlietlanden is an area between The Hague and Leiden. Wallstad does not occur but is a nickname of Nijmegen. Vlitdouw requires little imagination, and the name Blanquart was supplied by the neighbor of Mr. Drive, who bears this name. Then we have Langevoort, which also occurs nowhere, as well as Essenberg, based on Essenstein, a neighborhood in Voorburg, and Benning Cove, for which the famous jazz drummer Han Benning served as a model. Therefore, the 2 stops in that village are named after a brand of drumsticks and a brand of drumheads. Promark and Ramo respectively. And there are Westelerwoud, Sparbeek, and Durenberg. The latter is another adaptation of Dukenburg in Nijmegen. Finding names is not always easy, especially because you want to avoid comparisons. However, a large map still needs quite a few names, so Mr. Drive had to work hard. In fact, the same applies to street names. Here are a lot of names borrowed from all kinds of Dutch cities. But there are also streets named after OMSI maps, jazz musicians and famous Star Trek figures. That are names you won't come across in the real world. Although some cities have streets named after jazz musicians. By the way, the street names are read by Carola, my AI voice colleague.
Dag beste Marloes.
She sounds good and clear. You will also notice that there are duplications in street names. The various places on Vlietlanden have the same street names, such as Javastraat, Diamanthurst, and Amberhorst. 3 examples, but don't worry, there are more. I also want to talk about the bus company that does its job in Stadsregio Vlietlanden. It was invented by Jokervation and is called VBW, which stands for Vlitberg, Blanquart, and Wallstad, the biggest 3 cities on the map. There are still some uncertainties about the standard bus company. This VBW repaint is only available for the C2 of MX200. This bus can't be included with this map. Mr. Drive will provide the download package with the VBW repaints and an appropriate AI list. However, the standard bus for Stadsregio Vlietlanden will be the Aachen Citaro with an Arnet repaint from Danapo's workshop. This is to be able to deliver the map turnkey. Gee, my mouth has gone dry from all that drivel. I see that we have now arrived at the edge of the writer's quarter. We just have to get Tommy out of the way, and then we can steam on to Duivlandplein. There we drive into a new neighborhood called Dam View. This neighborhood has also been taken care of by Mr. Drive and has been extensively modified in some places. So there is enough to tell about that. Stay tuned.
Dag beste man.
After crossing the border of Reiter's neighborhood, we now hurry towards Damzicht. This neighborhood was added to the map by Mr. Drive at a later stage. There used to be a metro station here, but all metro lines have been removed from the city, including Metro Damzicht. The associated bus station has remained but not heavily used in all versions. In this version, 3 lines stop there again. 2 local and 1 city line. A new neighborhood has arisen north of Damzicht, which creates a connection with Oostervaart. But we won't get there today. We turn south from Damzicht to pass a number of streets with Rotterdam names. Damzicht is a neighborhood with many faces. A typical suburb that seems to be separate from the city. It is therefore self-sufficient in several respects. This district is located on the edge of Vlietzberg, and from here you can drive into the characteristic polder landscape towards places such as Langevoort and Blanquart. From here, various local lines run to Blanquart, Langevoort, Wallstad and other communities in between. Especially the bus station at the former metro station functions as a public transport hub in this part of the city. The name Dam View can be traced back to ancient times. In the distant past, there was a dam in this area that had to protect the residents of Vlietzberg against the rising water. The dam must have been located at the place where the metro later did its laps. The term metro has already been dropped. Does anyone know what this means? It is an abbreviation of Met een Turinggang Rotterdam Onderdoor. Vlietzberg and later Vlietlanden had a metro system. Pretty basic and not really there, but metros drove through Vlietzberg. Trams also drove around in the first few versions of the map. But they were so problematic that they were exchanged for buses. The not too active metro system turned out to do more harm than good and was eventually demolished. Well, there are people who think that riding a tram in Amsterdam is a good idea. The infamous Kevin Nitschmann is an example of this. He even built one of his maps based on a tram line. I don't think it was a great success. This Kevin Nitschmann is a special story. He delivered folders per linear meter, and he clearly opted for quantity and not for quality. His work didn't look good, was completely dysfunctional, full of rookie mistakes, and was a big concatenation of illogical construction and decisions. Yet he has a large fan base, especially in Germany, who pay way too much money for his shoddy work. His only acceptable work that Mr. Drive occasionally enjoys driving is the Düsseldorf routes. But they also had to be taken care of by Mr. Drive before they could be ridden properly. As mentioned before, good map builders are scarce, and even the so-called professionals who have released a payware map often make a mess of it. If you look at French cards such as Saint-Servain and Paris Grand Moulin, you will notice that they look quite good. But the functional side often lags far behind. Intersections are often composed of invisible splines, and the makers are rather lax when it comes to time schedules. Furthermore, the objects are often provided with overly heavy textures, just like the supplied buses, which are in many cases completely unusable. Darius Bode is the place to be for good payware. He too sometimes has some strange traits in his modus operandi, but his products are of good quality. The same applies to the builders of Rheinhausen, Berlin X10 and Aachen. All German material. In fact, There are not that many providers, but we must also recognize that the busim market is not really big either. It's a niche market. There is not much money for development, and now that OMSI has not been developed since 2014, it remains amazing that add-ons are still being developed for it. Competitors such as the Bus and Lotus do not seem to have much grip on the market yet. The Bus is very active these days and is undergoing major development. Lotus, as the dead-painted successor to OMSI, seems to have come to a standstill and is currently showing no development at all. In my opinion, the problem lies in the combination of Marcel Kunt and his, now wife, Janine. Marcel is a brilliant sim builder but somewhat disorganized beyond that gift. Janine is a pure autistic who with her strange behavior has become a kind of loose cannon that causes heavy damage to the entire Lotus company. I fear that Marcel will first have to get a divorce before he can do something about Lotus again. In summary, you could say that for the best busim experience, we still have to do it with OMSI in the near future. The bus will offer an alternative from the driver's side in the short term. I don't see that happening yet in the field of cities and network construction. There, the bus seems to be a closed box for the time being. Lotus has already been mentioned. Probably 2030 before this OMSI 3 will see the light. So back to OMSI. We are now driving on the Mathenaserlaan towards de Uithof. We share this part of the route with line 64, which has its terminus at the Uithof. The stops here bear names of well-known Rotterdam streets, although I must immediately admit that the Binnenweg is not included. At de Uithof there is an object that you cannot miss. The Flyer Stadium. This is an item that was actually created for the Daytonford map by one Daniel Flyer, probably not his real name. It is not the object but the creator, Mr. Flyer, who was the focal point of a former episode in Mr. Drive's life, the years when he was team leader of the World of OMSI team of OSIX.org. That popular website has been defunct for almost 5 years. One day in June, this forum suddenly disappeared. Supposedly by a hack, but Mr. Drive is convinced that the owner, named Jay Kia, pulled the plug himself. The question is whether this Jay Kia ever really existed, because on the forum there was also one David Rogers who had different personalities. Confusing in hindsight because this forum was globally focused, you would never meet the members in person, so you can't verify if they really exist. Mr. Drive only knows that his former Dutch staff team colleagues are people of flesh and blood. Although he has never even met them live. Still, those were fun times, and World of OMSI housed a wealth of OMSI add-ons. Let's just say nothing lasts forever. That's actually what's missing right now. A large international OMSI forum. Of course there is fellow films, but if you don't drive on the left side of the road there, your head will be chopped off. There are several forums in Eastern Europe and the Far East, but they are also focused locally. Of course there was the official OMSI forum, but that was expertly destroyed by Janine. Fortunately, Mr. Drive has all the knowledge in-house. He no longer needs real advice or help. But still, exchanging thoughts can be instructive. Let's see where Mr. Drive has brought us so far. And there's the Flyer Stadium, right in front of us. We have almost arrived at the Uithof, which is also known here as a sports campus. After de Uithof we go straight to south, past Kloosterpark, where there is also a bus depot. The term bus depot has different meanings in OMSI. In-game, it is the place where you can park a bus, and it often serves as an end and departure point at the start and end of the day. Sounds logical. But a depot is also an item that appears in the AI list. Then it determines which type of bus is assigned to a particular line. You can of course link the depots by name. That works fine if you use two types of buses, but that is rarely the case. Vlietlanden already has 6 species. And no, I'm not contradicting my previous statement, because there are only 3 different buses operating in that depot. We are now driving past de Uithof. On the right is the terminus of line 64, on the left you see the buildings of the sports campus. Again, not a beautiful environment, but that was deliberately chosen because after all, beauty and ugliness can be found in a big city, and beauty can also often be discovered in ugliness. Where would we be without the train? Sorry, I meant no beauty without ugliness and vice versa, of course. You still don't like it? Then realize that nothing is also something. So the complete emptiness is full of emptiness. It is the art of seeing things beyond their appearance. Only when you can also put ugly things into perspective, only then can you pass judgment on the beauty of the object. Now that's the sound of one hand clapping. Everything is as it is and is always in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is a thing in itself and will always depend on your personal taste. You may think, what nonsense, but these kinds of thoughts also play through your head when you are building an OMSI map. It is a known fact that Mr. Drive initially builds his work for his own pleasure. So it is purely Mr. Drive's good taste that prevails here. He also allows others the pleasure of writing a quality map but will never bend to their wishes or requirements. That gives Vlietlanden its own character, and because Mr. Drive is a logical and realistic person, the map will always approach reality as much as possible. This of course always within the possibilities that OMSI offers. Yes, some wisdom is needed to create a folder. While at the same time, you have to be stupid enough to ever start it. Those are the beautiful contrasts in life. It's all like a haiku, an unsolvable riddle. They also provide an eternal challenge. So you can say that OMSI is a big haiku in Mr. Drive's life. Building an OMSI map requires great concentration, so it is actually a kind of meditation. It therefore regularly happens that Mr. Drive gets spontaneous insights into other things that concern him in his life during his OMSI activities. So you can safely say that being busy with OMSI is especially good for the mind. In the meantime, we have arrived close to Kloosterpark. The Monastery Park bus depot is on the right behind the trees. If you walk far enough in that direction, you'll automatically get to Oostplein, which is on tile number 0_0, so it's the epicenter of the map. A little further on the left, there's a good chance we've already passed it, is the Klooster called Slangenberg and is known as Slangenberg Abbey. We don't seem to be that far from the end point anymore, but watch out. There is another small diversion ahead. As I said, the route of this line is of the meandering kind and that will be reflected again here. This line wants to connect and does so by connecting different parts of the city. Not a straight line, as modern public transport experts would like to realize. They want to design bus lines that no longer reach the neighborhoods but only run through the city via the larger roads. If you want to use such a line, you have to go there by bike. This, of course, is a ridiculous approach. A bus network should connect from door to door and, as it were, reach the people in the street. Major lines with long distances between stops are suitable for metros or light rail systems.
We have been driving through new territory for a while now. Where we drive now did not exist in previous versions of Stadsregio Vlietlanden. This is a somewhat larger road that connects Vlitburg Oost with Vlitburg Zuid. From this road you can go in different directions, although not all roads are passable. This way you can enter the Vlitburgsweg, but it is not connected to the part of the Vlitburgsweg that runs through Zuidburg.
A little further on you can go left towards Benning Cove, right towards Barnsteenplein, which is part of the southern part of Zuidburg, and straight on to Zuiderwaard and, purely virtually, the highway to Wallstad. Don't go looking for the latter because it only exists in Mr. Drive's head at the moment. Anyway, we will soon turn right, towards the Barnsteenplein and then via the Zuidplein to arrive at Zuiderwaard. It might get a bit boring, but that too was a metro station in the old versions. Now it has become a terminus for this line, and line 50 runs alongside it. Our line 67 therefore goes through the Zuidburg and Zuiderwaard districts. Adjustments have also been made in this area. These adjustments are not all along this line. But of course the route from this road to the Amber Square is a new addition. Less visible are the renovations around Zuidplein. Between Zuidplein and the Charlie Parker Brug stop, the entire bus lane has been reconstructed, and the three-way intersection with Overboschlaan and Zuidplein has been completely renovated. But you can only view that in the editor. The Zuidplein is still as it was in the original versions of Vlietlanden. Here, too, an adjustment is actually necessary. The question is whether that will still happen. For now, we still have to get there. Those traffic lights can take quite some time. I hate that, but it's a part of live, and since OMSI tries to emulate live, it's a part of OMSI. Oh dear, I really saw a hole in the asphalt there. Well, Vlietlanden is still not off the drawing board, so this mistake can easily be corrected. Anyway, we are now driving on the new road that connects Barnstone Square with the easternmost ring road. There must also be a finishing place around here, but this aside. Amber Square is prepared in this version for things that probably, never say never, won't happen. These are plans that include a connecting road to Zeelandplein. This is theoretically possible and opens up many new possibilities, but at the same time it would also be a new attack on the performance. So Mr. Drive has put this plan on hold. There are of course more things that have gone into oblivion or are no longer on the menu. For example, there is a nice list of endpoints that no longer exist. A few examples. Gulperdal, Lansingheig, Kenny Clark Square,
Hey, gozer!
Futura Park, Vlietlanden Verbachplein, South Square, Transferium West, Buitenwerd, Billiton Square, Metro Statenplein, Metro Molnauk, and the Europark Business Bus Station. Please fill me in if I forgot something. But let's see what we get in return. 7 city bus lines in Vlietlanden, recognizable by the numbering in the 60 series. Then some local lines. These are numbered in the 30 series, and 2 separate lines are numbered in the 50 series. Finally, and in my opinion the most important lines, the city services in Wallstad, are recognizable by the line numbering in the 20 series. Because we have to be honest. The Vlietlanden part dates from a distant OMSI past and was initially built with OMSI 1 in mind, which means as much as many lines as possible on as few tiles as possible. Wallstad and most rural areas have been built on the basis of OMSI 2. This means a kind of ribbon development with never more tiles than actually needed. Much less memory is needed that way. That enriches the performance significantly. Altogether there are 21 lines on the map. All according to the well-known Vlietlanden process. So long lines that cross the city or region. Enough choice to drive around for days. My own favorites are the lines that run in the region between Vlietlanden and Wallstad, and the lines 20 and 24 in Wallstad. Well, of course my preference doesn't matter. Okay, let's see what the flag looks like and where we are. That was a close call. We almost crashed into that AI bus. We now leave the Amber Square and head towards the Zuidplein. I have always found the beginning of this road a bit uncomfortable, but a better alternative without drastic consequences is not available at the moment. So let's see this as a beautiful piece of imperfection. Nothing is perfect in this world, and that's a good thing. In the end, we must have some room for improvement, otherwise, we will come to a standstill and then humanity will soon be over. We thus pass the invisible improvements and thus come fairly close to the end point of the line. So it's time for me to concentrate on my final speech. For me, really the final, because Mr. Drive has indicated that he will no longer use my services. Self-recording is faster and saves him a lot of typing. In addition, Mr. Drive is a trained and experienced voiceover, so why not? Personally, I think it's a shame because I really enjoy these rides. With all that AI traffic, the AI people and AI buses, I feel very comfortable as an AI voice. I am among like-minded people, so to speak. It really feels better than recording a McDonald's commercial or similar nonsense. Like an AI voice can eat a hamburger. Okay, so now a few seconds of rest and then my closing, where I tell everything you do and don't want to know about the release of the map. Before I do, I would like to point out the improvements, especially invisible ones, that have been made at and around the distant traffic lights. All good things are invisible. That light was red if I'm not mistaken. That's another ticket, luckily it's virtual. Then it's time for my farewell speech. And it's full of things you don't want to hear. Let's start with the release date. Mr. Drive aimed for a release in the first quarter of 2023. Unfortunately, that will not work. There is still a lot to be done at Stadsregio Vlietlanden, and Mr. Drive also has a busy day job. To make it all feasible and realistic, the release date has been moved to summer 2023. The intention is somewhere around July, August. Then the second announcement that won't really make anyone happy. This concerns the necessary add-ons for the map. That is much more than in the previous versions. So let's just list them. 1. Berlin X10. 2. Aachen. 3. Rheinhausen. 4. Hamburg Day and Night. 5. Hamburg Harbor City. 6. Hamburg E20. 7. Bremen. 8. Vienna 1. 9. Vienna 2. 10. Citybus 0305. 11. Saint Servain. 12. Munich. 13. Grand Paris Milan. You must have them in legal versions on your PC. All other requirements are included in the download package. About the download packages and the legality of this. There is always discussion, especially in the German scene, about whether you can include certain content. The point of view on this by House of Freak, the legal publisher, is the following: if the supply of content is expressly prohibited, this content will not be included in the map. All content that has been made public in the past by the owner and later revoked is included in the map. We will base this on the previously given consent. Content of which it is not clear whether there is permission will be included in the download. We deliberately chose to include everything and put it in a separate folder so that no incorrect content can be used or content that operates under the same name but has since been radically changed. Stadsregio Vlietlanden is a large map where it is impossible to constantly adjust content. We do not go along with the whims of various content creators who appear and disappear when they want. If you don't like this approach, remember that no one forces you to download this map. If you do download it, you agree with this view and you have no right to complain about it. It better be clear. So that is our official statement. So much for this message. The total package will be around 10 gigabytes and will be hosted via WeTransfer. Of course, the map is completely free. It will take a while before the map sees the light of day. That is not fun, of course. On the other hand, you still have the option to save in case you do not yet have all the DLCs in your possession. Now there you have it. Everything always has two sides. Then it's time to say goodbye. Today we accompanied Mr. Drive on a test drive on line 67. The aim was to test the line's new route and the modified scenery along part of the route. I think we can call it a successful test. The new area around the Burlage Bridge performed well and everything worked properly. In short, on to the next challenge. There is still much to do in the city. In any case, I want to thank you very much for all the attention and the ride along. I would say goodbye and enjoy the last meters of this ride. Best wishes. Joey, the AI voice.